The underdog keeps on fighting. The Miami Heat survived the 3-0 comeback attempt from the Boston Celtics, and they're now heading to their 7th NBA Finals since LeBron's first year. We're here today to talk about that Game 7 that happened last night, DeAndre Hopkins being cut and where he may end up in the future. And then we're going to get into some fan questions that you guys submitted over there on Instagram. So if you're not following us there, quick plug to go follow us there as a lot of fan interaction. But of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Bakari Steve. How you doing? How you feeling on this Tuesday morning?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Kind of a disappointing Game 7 yesterday, but, we'll talk about that. So
This is your early reminder to support us. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, as we're on the road to 300 subscribers here on the channel. So we appreciate any and all support, but help us get to that next milestone right here on the channel. But without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's get into it. As we're going to start here with DeAndre Hopkins being cut. The other day, after failing to be traded from the Arizona Cardinals, they just decided to cut their ties, as he wasn't showing up to OTAs. But he wants to join a contender, and per reports, the Chiefs and the Bills were the only teams that reached out for a trade situation there with Arizona. But those are the two teams with the lowest cap room situations. He is open to joining the Browns to reunite with Deshaun Watson, where when they did play together in Houston, he was a 3-time Pro Bowler. He was a touchdown leader for the receiver position. But he doesn't consider the Browns as major contenders. I guess I want to ask you now also to mention, the Browns did free up $17 million if he wanted to join the team. Where would you like to see DeAndre Hopkins go, and where do you think he'll end up if that's not the same place?
I think he'll end up. I know. Like you said, the Chiefs and the Bills are probably the top two in his mind. And then I saw somewhere that Browns and the Cowboys are, kind of dark horse contenders to get him. But I think if I had to choose a place for him to go or where I think he'd end up, I think I'd say the Bills. Just because there was that, I think he was on a podcast recently and he was asked to name his top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now. And Josh Allen was his number 1. It was like it took him no time to think about it. And, if we know anything about DeAndre Hopkins, he wants his money and he wants to be productive on the field. Josh Allen can get him the looks, especially playing alongside Stephon Diggs. I think he'd just be going to a great situation there in Buffalo if that's where he ends up going.
I mean, they're definitely in a win-now situation. Not that Kansas City is not, but, Stephon Diggs is 31, which is crazy to say, right? But Stephon Diggs is 31. Hopkins is pushing, he's over 30, right? So, these are two receivers that they're going to be coming to a team that is in a win-now mode, right? No shocker there, but to me, I'd like to see him go to the Kansas City Chiefs. The best coach in the league, the best quarterback in the league, the best player in the league, and Pat Mahomes, Pat Majesus, right? But when you go to a team like the Chiefs that don't have a dominant number 1, he can not only get a little bit of money, but he can go to a winning situation with a winning culture, and you're gonna have the best quarterback in the world throwing you the ball. I don't think he gets any better than that. I think Kadarius Toney would be his only competition for targets at the wide receiver position, and he can't play more than 6 games. Right, as a Gator fan, I know that best. But, he'd have to compete with Travis Kelce, but again, you're going to a team with the best coach, best quarterback, best situation for me. It would be the Kansas City Chiefs. But Arizona, they're a disaster right now. They brought in a new head coach, John Gannon, and now their star quarterback, he might be out 10 weeks to the year. Their best receiver, maybe their best player in DeAndre Hopkins is he's now gone. Budda Baker might get traded here. A team that 2 years ago was like 10-2, and now they have fallen in every way possible. They also don't have a ton of money. Do you believe Arizona is going to be the worst team next season now that DeAndre Hopkins is gone? Because nothing seems to go right for them right now.
I guess, yeah, when you think about it, when you were like, okay, who are the worst teams, and you think of them, I guess Arizona is the first team that comes to mind, at least for me, and it could be because we were just talking about them. But, Arizona's had these problems, like you mentioned, since that 10-2 year where they went on that losing streak for the rest of the season, got embarrassed by the Rams in the playoffs, and then, we all know what happened last year. Even before Kyler got hurt, between Kyler and just the coaches, everything, they just didn't have a set chemistry in the locker room. They didn't have a set, they didn't have a real leader or voice of reason in there. And they fired the coach, Cliff Kingsbury, and then,
By the way, I'm not meaning to cut you off, but I thought he was the worst coach in the NFL, and I've been a big advocate for that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's why I say they didn't have that voice of reason, somebody to kind of whip them back into shape in the locker room, and Cliff definitely wasn't going to do that, so they fire him. And then, obviously, and rightfully so, you have these competitors on your team, competitors who feel like their individual job alone should be recognized at a higher level, like DeAndre Hopkins, like Budda Baker. They're going to want out of your organization because at the end of the day, in their mind, if we're not competing for a Super Bowl, then what are we competing for in the first place? So,
and they're only getting older.
Yeah, exactly, right.
But moving over to the Eastern Conference Finals, last night, the Miami Heat came out. They were up 11 or so after the first quarter, and they were up by 11 or so at halftime. Basically, what I'm saying is they had a good lead. Boston made a little bit of a comeback effort, but Miami ended up finishing the deal. And this is a team, that they lost their first play-in game. Obviously we know they would have faced Boston first round if they won, but they lost their first play-in game, and then they were down by 6 with under 3 minutes to go against the Bulls in their second play-in game. And they came back, won that game, then first round. You got the title favorites, a team that is, in many eyes, is the best team in the league. For me, it was the best Bucks team of all time. They're the title favorite in many eyes. You take them down as an 8 seed in 5 games. Okay, fine. They had some injuries. Now you're going to go face a team that looked amazing in round 1 against the Cavs. A tough, gritty defensive team in the Knicks. They take them down. Then they finish off by defeating the reigning Eastern Conference champions and the Boston Celtics. It seems like their toughest task is yet ahead of them. They're going to the finals, still heavy underdogs. This team, the road just from play-in to here has been absolutely insane. But we can dive into Boston before we get back into Miami. But for Boston, they tried to make history. They dug themselves into a hole, down 3-0 or 0-3 rather, and they tied it back up. But in this Game 7, Jason Tatum, he injured his ankle on that first play of the game, basically, for Boston. And he surprisingly, props to him, but he surprisingly didn't make that his excuse in the post-game presser. Most people will definitely lean on that. LeBron. But Jaylen Brown, the co-star of this team, when Jason Tatum went down, Jaylen Brown, he had 8 turnovers in this game. And at one point he had more turnovers than the entire Heat team there in the third quarter. Tatum came to the post-game presser. One thing he did say was that he wants the Celtics to pay Jaylen Brown, which if you pay both of them, since they're both all-NBA players, that's going to be about $600 million wrapped up between the both of them. If you're the GM of the Celtics, I forget who it is at this point, but if
Brad Stevens.
It is Brad Stevens, yeah. If you're Brad Stevens, would you pay these guys that hefty amount of money, saying that the last couple of years you haven't been able to win the finals?
Well, I think when you got to look at it, you got to look at what would happen if you don't. If you don't pay Jaylen Brown and you let him walk in free agency, well, what happens then? Now you have to kind of restructure your roster. Are you going to be able to get another star that's on Jaylen Brown's level? We know, obviously, Jaylen Brown had 8 turnovers, and at one point, 8 turnovers, 6 made field goals, or 6 attempted, whatever the case was.
Right.
But we've seen this Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown duo, throughout the years, and by all accounts, this regular season and some games throughout the playoffs, this was their best year together. Obviously, they went to the finals last year, and they've been to plenty of conference finals before. Obviously, all the Game 7s they played in together since, both have come into the league. I think when you look at that history, it's going to be hard to say, no, we shouldn't pay Jaylen Brown, because he's been there every step of the way with Jason Tatum. And like I said, if you are going to get rid of him, and it's not going to be a sign and trade, well, then now you're putting your roster, now you're setting your roster back, because it's going to be Jason Tatum, then who? Derek White,
Right.
And without, if you're already paying Jason Tatum, you're not going to have enough money to go get somebody else on the max, because you were going to use your bird rights for Jaylen Brown. Now you have to kind of restructure your roster, trade away some key pieces just to get some, maybe another borderline star. It'd just be a lot more work to get rid of Jaylen Brown and then figure out what direction you want your roster to go in as far as secondary star, than to keep them and say, okay, we have our 2 stars, we have our All-NBA guy and another All-NBA guy, like you said. Let's see what we can do around them again.
Yeah, aside from Pat Riley, I think the best executive / GM in the league is Brad Stevens. A guy he was a decorated coach in his time, and then that's why it was so surprising when he, I guess, took the step down and then took the step up to being the team's GM. But for the Miami Heat, The Jimmy Butler, since joining the Heat, I believe in 2019 or so, or 2018, regardless, he got them to their first finals appearance in the bubble since the LeBron James era. He's the leader of the first 8 seed to reach the NBA Finals since 1999. They're the first play-in team to make the conference finals and the NBA Finals. He's led Miami to 3 conference finals appearances in 4 years, and he's now headed to their second NBA Finals in that same 4-year span. It'll be very interesting to see where he's ranked between the both of us in this offseason. I know we're going to do our rankings here, but just overall thoughts on the Heat in this game, and I have some other notes, but just overall thoughts on the Heat and how they've come this far.
Yeah, when you watch the Heat, obviously the Heat are a team you can't look at on paper and be like, okay, the other team's going to win. I made the mistake every single round going against them, and here they are in the finals.
Right.
And even during that 3-game slip, nobody on that team was phased. Even when it looked like they had lost all momentum they had, they were able to come out Game 7 and they just trusted each other. Max Strus has hit some big threes off the move when they needed him to. Gabe Vincent, obviously, Kobe Martin. Caleb Martin.
Yeah.
Obviously these guys, they stepped up when they needed to be, and that's what allowed Jimmy, and his team to just kind of get it done. They all believed in each other. Eric Spoelstra from the top, and it started there. He was like, we've been in this situation before. We've been able to come to Boston, and we've been able to blow the brakes off of the Celtics here. Obviously, it helped that Jason Tatum did roll his ankle 26 seconds into the game. But, even Bam didn't play good, games, 4 through 7, and they were able to get it done. And so This is just a gritty team. This shows you what grit and grind and hustle can get you. And obviously, you have a player in Jimmy Butler who's been playing like the best player in the playoffs on your team as well.
Yeah, is Spoelstra the best coach in the league to you? I know he's up there with the likes of Mike Malone. You could put up there JB Bickerstaff.
No, JB Bickerstaff. I'm a better coach than JB Bickerstaff, and I sit up home on my couch.
At least the biased Cavs fan wants to at least believe he's a some way decent coach. But it's amazing that Spoelstra is able to do this year in and year out, be competitive with not the superstar loaded rosters that he once had, right? But other notes just from this series overall is that Caleb Martin, he lost the Eastern Conference Finals MVP by 2 votes. So that's something very interesting. Is Jimmy, he had a good first 4 games, I want to say, but the latter half, first 3 games, the latter half of it, he wasn't there. And Caleb Martin was consistently there from day one. That would have been a crazy thing to happen. That would have been like Iggy taking the Finals MVP from Curry if Martin won that Eastern Conference Finals MVP.
Yeah, when you think about it, even last night, the Celtics, they were down 7 at the end of the third quarter. Caleb Martin is who got them that lead back up into double digits.
He was 12 in the first quarter?
And then he came down at the beginning of the fourth quarter. This man comes down, shoots a straight on 3, and now all of a sudden it's like a 15-point lead for the Heat, and they didn't look back since that moment. So, Caleb Martin's, it's crazy to say Caleb Martin's been, if not their most consistent player, their second most consistent player behind Jimmy, which, that's why I think this Heat team, it's hard to analyze, because if Caleb Martin's your second best player, you're going into every game like, oh, we lost. I'm thinking, to myself, and then you look at his averages, he averaged 19-6. Guess who else averaged 19-6 who made All-NBA? Jaylen Brown. So, it's just crazy to think of, how we look at players because of their name or how they've played beforehand, rather when they step up to the moment.
Yeah, now I know we're going to talk about the NBA Finals on Thursday, but I mean, very quickly, when we just do a quick Finals preview, would you rather have Caleb Martin as your second? Well, I don't want to disrespect Bam. We'll say third best player. Would you rather have Caleb Martin or Aaron Gordon as your third best player?
I'd rather have. Honestly, I'd rather have Caleb Martin.
Caleb Martin, okay. Yeah. Would you rather have MPJ as your third best player or Caleb Martin?
I take MPJ there.
Okay, and Jamal Murray, I would assume is Jamal Murray, right?
Yeah, and we disrespect Bam on here. Bam is the third best player now.
That's a hot take. We'll talk about that on Thursday as we're going to get into some rankings there. But the other interesting notes is Kevin Love. Obviously, we know he had a lot of losing years to start his career. But ever since he got traded to the Cavs, every single time he's made the playoffs since that point, he has made it to the NBA Finals. So every time in his long career, he's been to the NBA Finals, which is absolutely insane. It's almost like James Jones there with LeBron James for all those years. But Pat Riley, the executive of the Miami Heat, he has now made his 19th NBA Finals, whether it feels as a player, coach, or executive. And that's about 25% of the total NBA Finals that we've seen to this point. Pat Riley. I mean, he's a legend, right? But moving over to the rig is in. Eric Lewis, he is an NBA ref, right? And he's been around for years and years. But over the last span of years, the Celtics are 34-2 when he is officiating. His entire family, through the internet does their due diligence. They deep dive in all his personal information. His entire family is huge Boston Celtics fans. He's a known Boston Celtics for lifer, right? And many calls have been controversial in favor of the Celtics, especially late in games. One that came to mind for me when I was reading on this was, I don't know if you remember, but after the trade deadline, the Lakers and the Celtics played. It was either LeBron or AD. They went up for a late game layup. He got smacked in the head, and it was a clear foul, right? And I understand letting guys play at the end of the games, but it was a clear foul, and Eric Lewis was the guy looking at it, and he didn't call the foul. I said penalty. He didn't call the foul. Now, do you think that this guy, just quick thoughts on it? Do you think he is the next ref that rigs NBA games?
I'm going to give him a benefit of the doubt and say no.
Right, could just be coincidence.
Exactly, and from what I understand, they're not even looking into his officiating during the games. It's a burner account, believe it or not, that sticks up for refs and basically for refs and the rules of basketball.
They said he used his personal email on that account too.
Well, he got caught.
Right.
And I mean, if he's sticking up for refs, it sounds to me that he's saying, hey, refs do their job. Like, I don't think he's singling himself out. Like, hey, Eric Lewis is the best ref in the league. You got to listen to everything he's saying. I think. If anything, he was more so like, the nonsense that refs do this or that is probably, he's being biased towards refs, obviously. Obviously, the Celtics 34-2, that's like Chris Paul being 0-17 in the playoffs when Scott Foster is the ref. And then there was another, when Scott Foster and who else was, it was somebody else officiating last night. The Heat were they had a terrible record against those two. Yep. I think coincidences like that always happen in the NBA. When it comes to refs, I mean, everybody's going to look at the stats and be like, hey, this is what happens. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for right now without knowing any of the full details and say, he does his job on the court. I'll even say, hey, he missed the LeBron foul, even though it was a clear foul in the replay. I remember watching it. I remember I was like, what happened? I didn't know what happened. Right. And obviously on the replay, you're like, oh, it was a foul. But, I'll say that he missed that call, and for the most part, even if it's not boss or whatever, he does his job to the best of his ability, which is why he probably felt like he needed to go make an account to, protect the refs. So
yeah, I mean, if it was another since the Tim Donaghy situation, in the early 2000s, rather, I think it's the NBA does a lot more research and they spend a lot more detail. They go back and watch these games and grade the refs now, ever since the Tim Donaghy stuff. So I think this would have been stopped a while ago if they thought that he was actually rigging games in favor of the Celtics. But Lonzo Ball.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's like that one ref. I can't remember. It was who Fred VanVleet went off after a game versus the Nuggets. He name dropped the ref and obviously a few F balls after that. But I remember reading the ref. They ended up he wasn't a crew chief anymore. They took away his crew chief reffing position, so he was the second ref in command or even a third sometimes.
Right.
And that went on for a stretch of games. Whoever that ref was, they graded him. They did all their work on him, and they were like, you know what? We're not going to let you be the crew chief ref anymore. We're going to make you the second ref or the third ref.
Right.
Which is crazy. That it took Fred VanVleet, getting fined $25,000 to speak out of terms against this guy for that to happen. But that just goes to show you that the NBA will do their work and their investigations, and if it's bad enough, they will do something like that.
Right. Which is always a good thing, right?
Exactly.
We want purity here in the NBA. But Lonzo Ball now. Chicago Bulls and their doctors, they privately believe that Lonzo will never play in the NBA again. This is a young, promising star, a guy who was drafted at the number 2 pick. And after battling those jump shot allegations and jump shot scandals early in his career, he fixed his jumper, right, early in his career, and then he's been a great defensive player. He's developed that in the NBA. Basically what I'm saying, he's a young, promising star, elite two-way player. He just got a big contract just not too long ago. And the last that we heard from the Bulls doctors is that he couldn't walk up the stairs. His chronic knee injuries were that bad to the point where it was hard for him to stand up, right? And it just sucks to hear that about, a young promising star that we have here in the NBA, especially a name that holds as much value as Lonzo Ball. I will say that if we don't get to see Lonzo again, this is going to be one of those what-if situations, like a Brandon Roy, right? I wouldn't say the level of D Rose because he won an MVP, but it's going to be one of those what-if situations, and I just hope he still gets that money.
Yeah, obviously, I think he already had the surgery that's going to keep him out for all of next season. I think he had that earlier this year, I believe, or they were talking about him having that surgery to keep him out all of next season. And they were pretty much like, if it's going to keep him out all of next season already, and we're only in, I think at the time it was like February of 2023.
Right.
They don't think he'll come back. I think when they say, I think they have more confidence that he won't play, and then him coming back. And he even said it himself. He couldn't run correctly. He couldn't walk correctly. He couldn't do any of that. And like you said, it sucks to see Lonzo go out like this because this is somebody who was. This is somebody who, his dad put him in a lot of hot seats, put him in a lot of fire.
A lot.
But Lonzo, he consistently got better at his game year after year. Even that year he got hurt, that was by far his best career year. That first year in Chicago, he was shooting a three at 40% or something like that, and he playmaking, defense, everything that you wanted out of a point guard. You're paying that much. Lonzo was doing that. So like you said, it really sucks to see Lonzo if this is, if that was the last time. I'm sure he'll probably get a comeback attempt to probably ramp it up. But, rather we'll see him on the NBA court, who knows. Even LaMelo going through these ankle injuries, it's a sad NBA when we can't see the Ball brothers ball out.
Right. So. And I mean, the NBA, it's just, that's the worst part of sports, is just injuries. And, this is another young talent that we may never see touch a basketball court again. So, prayers up to Lonzo. Hopefully, we're hoping the best here. And hopefully he's on the court sooner rather than later. But moving over to the fan-led questions, just the other day, which shout out to you guys because it was kind of last minute. But just the other day over on Instagram, I reached out and I posted. I asked you guys to send us some questions. This is something that at the beginning of this podcast is history. I said I wanted to do this once a month. So we've gotten away from that, no doubt. But it's the support. I was wondering if we were still going to get a lot of interaction, right, with this over on the Instagram account. But we did. We got 6 or 7 questions here for you guys, and they're all really good questions, to be completely honest with you guys. But we're going to start here. The first question comes in from Amir. He has a couple questions here, and the first one, it's a very good one. What is worse to you? Do you think the Lakers getting swept in the Western Conference Finals, or the Heat blowing a 3-0 lead? Obviously we know now the Heat have won. They've closed it off, and they're going to the NBA Finals. But in a hypothetical world, what would be worse? The Lakers getting swept in the manner that they did, or the Heat blowing that 3-0 lead?
I said the Heat. Because when you look at it, all 4 of those games were competitive for the Lakers. I believe, even game 1, they came back in it.
Yeah.
We all know Bron shot that straight on 3. Isn't the reason they lost, but and they were close. Basically in all 4 of those games, the Heat. In the fashion that they were able to get that 3-0 lead, I think, for the most part, they were in control of 2 of those games. I think one of them, which was game 2, was pretty close. And even then, Grant Williams decided to start talking with 4 minutes left. And we all know that Jimmy, came alive. So I think when the Heat are able to get 3 games like that on a team that, they have everybody healthy, the Celtics had everybody healthy. They obviously dismantled them 3 games in a row. If they were to lose 4 straight, regardless if it does, to me, it doesn't matter if you're 8 seed or what at that point.
Right.
Even in the Lakers' case, they started the season 2-10. They weren't even, for all accounts, weren't supposed to make the playoffs.
Right.
The Heat obviously they were in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, and they had a disappointing season, but they were still in the playoffs. Obviously, nobody expected them to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but you're up 3 games to nothing on a team that you just lost 2-7 last year. At that point, to me, seeding doesn't matter, whether it's the 8 or 2 seed or whatever. You can't lose 4 straight. Obviously, they didn't, so they got it done.
Right, yeah, I was going to say, if you're the first 3-0, or if you're the first of anything in history, if you're on the bad side of it, right, if you're on the receiving end, that's never good, right? So, if you're the first 3-0 team out of the years and years of basketball has been around, to blow a 3-0 lead in a 7-game series, that's never good, right? Again, like you said, it doesn't matter seeding. You were at that point. You were up 3-0. you have to finish the job in 4 games. Luckily, they had all 4 games to get it done.
Yeah.
But they did close it off. And like you said, the Lakers were very competitive. I think it was a very disappointing finish to their season. But again, these are 2 play-in teams that even if the Heat blew that 3-0 lead or the Lakers got swept, I think both of these teams, they shouldn't have been here, right? They shouldn't have been here saying that they were both play-in teams, had their questions all season, and they just put it together at the right time. But I think blowing a 3-0 lead, being the first in NBA history, is definitely worse than just a regular sweep that we see every year. But moving over to who has been the most impactful role player here in the conference finals round, specifically the conference finals round. And to me, I'm not going to lie, I had 2 different people for this one. It all just depended on who won last night. Because to me, if you're impactful, that means you're helping win basketball games, right? So who is the best at that, not being a superstar or a star player on their teams? To me, I had Derek White and I had Caleb Martin. You touched on a lot of stuff earlier with Caleb Martin. We kind of brushed on it, but he was 2 or 3 votes away from being the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, which I think right now is the Larry Bird Award. But Caleb Martin, I mean, he was a consistent 15 to 25 points a night for that Heat team, games 1 to 7 against Boston, who is a very talented defensive team, right? I mean, but he's been a spark plug this entire playoff run. And, I mean, for coming out of college with him and his twin, Cody Martin, who is no longer in the league, I don't think. Or he's with Charlotte still.
I think.
But regardless, I know Cody was the more coveted twin coming out of college, out of Nevada, I believe. And Caleb Martin, I mean, he's kind of been an afterthought in his career, but he found a spot with the Heat, and he's been turning up. He's playing his best career basketball, and I'm not sure if he's up for an extension this offseason, but if he is, he's going to get some money.
Yeah, for me, I went in the Western Conference. The only reason I didn't pick a player from the Heat or the Celtics teams is because I wanted to take somebody off the bench. I guess, I could have taken whoever in the East. But I decided I was going to take Bruce Brown. The first thing that comes to mind, Bruce Brown in his conference finals is like the 9 points in 6 minutes or 11 points in 9 minutes in Game 1 versus the Lakers. Bruce Brown, his entire career, he's been, believe it or not, he's been a deadly pick and roll player as the screener. I remember watching the play-in game, Cavs versus Nets last year. Bruce Brown I think he had a triple-double, or he was 1 rebound or assist away from a triple-double, and he tore the Cavs up from just setting screens and rolling the entire game, shooting that floater. He was able to use that effectively in this conference finals versus the Lakers. Every time he came in, he was a breath of fresh air for a Denver bench unit who we know can struggle at times if Jokic or Jamal Murray isn't out on the floor or whoever. But Bruce Brown, he delivered that energy, that impact in the West for the Nuggets. And that's why I think he's my most impactful, at least out in the West. Like you said, Caleb and Derek White for role players. But, Bruce Brown coming off the bench. We know the value of bench pieces and bench assets in the playoffs. So I gave it to Bruce Brown.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe like an Aaron Gordon or maybe like or KCP. But those guys are starters. I was trying to go with someone. I was gonna go Bruce Brown, but I just figured I was gonna go maybe somewhere in the East. And Derek White was my number 1, to be completely honest. But they lost, so I can't have someone who lost right in the conference finals round be the most impactful. But moving over to the next question, this one comes in from Zach. Shout out to him. But how do you project Bronny at the next level and beyond? Whether if that's college or the NBA. For me, I was looking more so long-term, and I was thinking more so NBA because we know he's going to get drafted. He's LeBron James' son, and I hate to say that to diminish his play, but no matter what, he's going to be on an NBA roster at some point. So that's where I was projecting him to be. For me, a comparison would have been like a guy like Lonzo Ball. I believe you had that in your notes before the show. But a guy like Lonzo, where he's not LeBron James, right? He's not that superstar level player, a guy that's going to take over the league and take over generations, right? Be a generational player. But I believe just with his play style and his IQ of the game, offensively, defensively, he can be there and be an elite level player like Lonzo Ball was on both sides of the ball and be a very key contributing piece to winning teams.
Yeah, when I said Lonzo, I was thinking more so like rookie Lonzo. The Lonzo who, he might not shoot the best percentages and his stats might not be eye-popping, but he is a two-way threat, especially on defense. Lonzo, we all know his rookie year struggled with his shot. I don't think Bronny will struggle to that extent, but I think that, Bronny will be able to get those games like Lonzo used to have, where it was like, 11 points or and 11 boards and maybe 13 assists. Especially if Bronny does play the lead guard at the next level. Obviously, we have to wait and see how college goes and what his role is there. But another player I had in mind was kind of more so like DeAnthony Melton. Maybe he might have a higher ceiling, but I guess if I had to pick a floor, it'd probably be DeAnthony Melton. I said DeAndre Melton. DeAnthony Melton. DeAnthony Melton is a fantastic two-way player. He just played for Philly. Two-way player. He can play both sides of the ball. Yeah. He has the length. He has the IQ on defense, and he can create certain shots on offense, give you different looks on offense. And if Bronny doesn't pan out to be anything spectacular or anything far-fetched, DeAnthony Melton is still a good player to be model. I mean, you're still in the NBA. You're still, contributing to teams in the playoffs, whatever you have it. But, it's kind of hard because we have to, like I said, we have to see Bronny play at least in college to kind of get a more so of an idea. Because it's one thing playing against high schoolers. It's another thing playing against guys who are potential NBA prospects. And then it's another thing when you're in the league. So, I guess those are just two players off the top of my mind.
Yeah. For LeBron, I mean, if Bronny doesn't work out, Bryce James is coming up. Bryce James is arguably better right now than Bronny. So a couple years after Bronny enters the league, we'll get to see another James in the NBA. But moving over, what is the key to the Cavs making a deep playoff run next season? To me, I'm basically just going to say that we could go on, right? We could solo make a Cavs rant podcast, right? We could just name it Everything Rant, right? I don't know, but. For me, the key is adjusting, right? The key is better coaching, an improved JB Bickerstaff going into next year.
Which isn't going to happen.
Well, that's the hope, right? That's the key for me, if we can make a deep playoff run, because we know that we know Evan Mobley's going to take a step up, or at least we believe. We know Darius Garland maybe can take another step up in his game overall, right? Maybe Isaac Okoro can be a somewhat reliable shooter next year. But just putting your guys in the right spots, maybe if Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are not working, don't keep them on the court just because they're our best players. Switch them out, run different lineups, adjust, right? That's something that we did not do except for Game 2 of the playoffs. I believe JB Bickerstaff, we have our questions. Both of us care. We don't care for him either. I mean, Monty Williams is still out there. I'd love to have him as our head coach. But
right. Or even Doc Rivers. We at least get to the second round and lose in 7.
Right.
After having a 3-2 lead.
But I think, the key for me, sure, do we need some wings and stuff, which I think you're going to touch on here. But adjusting for me is the biggest thing, and just an improved JB Bickerstaff.
Yeah, I said we need bench scoring or bench assets desperately. Obviously, the one thing that haunted us in the playoffs is we run with our starting lineup, and we didn't have anybody to come off the bench. I mean, especially after we adjusted and put Karras in the starting lineup, which I don't know why we did it, because Karras was our best player, and he was coming off the bench to give us a little bit of spark.
Right.
Once we put him in the starting lineup, we didn't have anybody. Chetty Osman was coming in, getting torched by 15, and getting torched for 15 by Jalen Brunson, and then couldn't hit the side of the barn on offense. And other than that, we literally had nobody to speak of to put in the game. Ricky Rubio was unplayable. Dean Wade was unplayable. But these are guys that had to get a little bit of run just to get our starters some rest. And then secondly, we need a true 3-and-D wing. Isaac Okoro is not that. He's labeled a defender, and I've been on record on the spot as saying I don't know why you get the label of defender when the person you're guarding drops 35 on 11 of 12 shooting from the field. And Isaac Okoro is very foul prone. It feels like he fouls every other chance he gets. And on top of that, I just don't think that it's worth it to keep him around in the starting lineup. If we can go get an upgrade at that 3 position, that would desperately help, because then we don't have to play Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley on the floor at the same time. We could take one of those guys off, slide that 3-and-D or whoever it is down to the 4 and play a smaller lineup, more beneficial one with Evan Mobley at the 5. And that went into another thing I said, which is better defensive anchor on defense. Obviously, we know that the defensive prowess with Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, but Jarrett Allen, he just plays way too timid, way too soft to get it done against these heavier bigs, and Evan Mobley just isn't there physically yet. If I had to keep one in the game, it'd be Evan Mobley, but if we can go get somebody like a Mitchell Robinson or whoever the case may be, I think that helps our chances a lot.
Yeah, I think definitely overall, if we had more spacing, I'd love to see Evan Mobley come into this next year with a little bit more size, a little bit more, toughness, I guess is the way to put it. Because if he can run that 5, or at least just at times run the 5, I mean, with a lineup of Garland, Mitchell, let's say we could get a Cam Johnson or Harrison Barnes, have one of them out there who could space the floor. sure, Isaac Okoro at this point would have to be out there as well. But just to have more spacing around our star guards would be amazing, right? And we don't have to rely on Evan Mobley to make the outside shot, or at least put him in that position. But I also think he'll come in next season with a better jump shot. And I think that's only going to help us next season. But moving over to another question from Zach is, with the AFC East being so competitive, do you believe the Bills are going to win the division? Or if they don't win the division, who do you see them being dethroned by, right? And for me, the easy answer was the team who I believe I had in our early rankings winning the division in the Miami Dolphins. I believe the Miami Dolphins picking up Jalen Ramsey for a bag of chips and a high five, right, in this offseason. Jalen Ramsey coming over as maybe still the best corner in the NFL is helping the desperately needed secondary help in Miami. They still have Bradley Chubb on that side of the ball. They still have Xavier Howard. That defensive side of the ball is there. Not to mention they have the offensive genius and the head coach in Mike McDaniel. They have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, two promising receivers here in the NFL. And, they just have a great offense. Tua is bulked up this offseason. If he can stay healthy, I believe, with or without the Bills being good, the Miami wins this division.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't go with Miami here is because of those two health concerns, and obviously we have to see how he is back on the field and what he can go through. But before he got hurt last year, he did take a step up on the field. He did, improve his game. We'll just have to see if he can stay on the field, like you said. And with that being said, my choice was the Jets. I went with the Jets because whenever you go get a talent like Aaron Rodgers, who he could be 25, 35, 45, 55. If you're going to get Aaron Rodgers, and he's committed, and and he's driven to lead a franchise to a Super Bowl, I think that that would have to be my favorite to dethrone the Bills. Obviously you have Aaron Rodgers. This Jets team alone last year felt like they had enough to get into at least the playoffs. Obviously the play of Zach Wilson didn't help, but this Jets defense is really good. They have some young playmakers on that offensive side of the football, and when you bring in more vets at the receiver position and then Aaron Rodgers, I believe that your franchise is ready to take the next step from hoping to make the playoffs to we're expected to make a deep playoff run. And I think the Jets have everything that they need equipped when you starting with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that they can't be competitive next year. Garrett Wilson should take another step up. And as long as Rodgers isn't tearing his calf running with the weight behind him, this team should be in pretty good shape. But the last question is coming in from Tyler. Shout out to him. And I don't want to preface this by saying that, Zach asked about D-Hop. We had Tyler ask about D-Hop. We already answered that, right? But he also was asking if we could give our division winners. And I'm going to hold off on that, Tyler, because we're going to have a video like that coming before the NFL season. So just stay tuned for that. But his question is, who are your early AFC and NFC winners? And then give a sleeper team to look out for in either conference, right? For me, my AFC winner, we both have the same. It's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that I said earlier on that first episode that they are the team that I believe will win the Super Bowl next season. And nothing's changed here for me. I mean, maybe the best offensive receiving core in the league as far as running back, tight end, receiver. They have the second best player in the league, in my opinion. And aside from their head coach, their team's very well-rounded.
Yeah, I agree with you. Everything you just said is pretty much the reason I had them. Last year, they were a missed blocking assignment away from being able to go down and win a game in Kansas City. You can even say that they were a late push out of bounds away from at least going into overtime in that game. I think that they'll come back driven this year because they feel like they should have been in that big game this past year. Like you said, Joe Burrow, if he's not number one, he's number two. You have him in the top three, whatever. Joe Burrow, he is that guy. Obviously the dynamic between him and Jamar Chase. And you still have other guys out there like T. Higgins, and you have your offense. I believe that this Bengals team, they definitely have everything it takes to get to the Super Bowl this year. At least, yeah.
At least, as of right now, I think it's a clear I'm going Cincinnati. But I will say that if DeAndre Hopkins goes to the Chiefs, that might change my, prediction. But, that we'll wait for that to happen to see. But if he goes to the Bills or any other team, Bengals are still going to be my favorite. Moving over to the NFC, and I was surprised by your answer here, but I assume that you put the bias aside. For me, I'm not. I don't have any connection to Philadelphia, but they're going to be my NFC winners here, as I think they're the most complete team in the NFL. They still have an MVP level quarterback who will probably take a step back this year statistically, but I think this team will be better, if that makes any sense. I think they might lose a couple more games, but they'll be a better overall team. And I mean, whenever you have Devontae Smith, a former Heisman winner, as your second receiver, and their first receiver is entering his prime in A.J. Brown, this team is very dangerous, both sides of the ball. They just picked up Jalen Carter, which might have been the best player in the draft class. This team is set for another Super Bowl run.
Yeah, not going to lie, I kind of forgot about the draft even existed. But when I picked the 49ers, it was because they were able to bolster their defense that was already really good this past year. And I believe that whenever you have a Shanahan running your offense, the QB situation really won't matter. But if they are able to get Brock Purdy, or if Trey Lance is able to come back and actually prove doubters wrong, whatever the case may be, I think that this 49ers team will pick up where they left off last year, get back to that title game, and say, hey, Eagles, we lost last year because we didn't have a quarterback. We're going to show you what we can do fully healthy. And who knows, with that new defense they got, especially with Javon Hargrave, maybe they can go get a win and, end up in the Super Bowl. And that's why I have them, because grudges are, if we know anything about rivalries and grudges, they don't go away, especially in pro sports. This is a rivalry, obviously, for a long time. And these are players who genuinely want to prove to each other, hey, you're not as good as you think. You're not big and bad. You're not that tough. So I believe that the 49ers, last year it was the Eagles. This year it could be the 49ers.
Right, and I believe they just haven't been able to get over that hump in a couple years. But again, like you said, they probably have the best coach here in the NFL. But moving over to our sleeper teams, to me, I cheated a little bit. I gave 2, but I put it as like a pie chart here. As 75% of my sleeper would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. The other 25 would be the Miami Dolphins. I touched on them earlier, being more complete offensively, defensively. They have an offensive genius there in Mike McDaniel. It all just depends on Tua's health. If he's healthy and he can win big-time games, I believe this team is going to be a sleeper to win the title, right? And then, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars, like I mentioned, might be a surprise, but for a team that, they have Trevor Lawrence, a guy who took a leap last year. I expect him to take another leap this year and really enter that top 3 quarterback conversation. I believe in that weak division they're primed for that number 1 spot in the NFL, at least in the AFC. Not to mention they bring in Calvin Ridley, a guy who was a top 5 receiver before he started gambling illegally. But, he's coming to this offense that already had a great year last year. It's the second year for the Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence pairing there in Jacksonville. I think just offensively, defensively, they're there. Trayvon Walker could take a step up. I think they're my sleeper team here in 2023.
Yeah, I went with my sleeper team when it came to what I was thinking. So I was thinking more so in my mind of who do I think could dethrone one of these teams I have picked out of the AFC or NFC, and I went with the Ravens out in the AFC. Partly because I don't think I think firing Greg Roman from what it sounds like coming out of the Ravens camp or everything that we hear from analysts or whatever, this Lamar is thriving in this new offense. Everybody loves this new offense. It's not as run heavy. It plays more so to everybody's strengths. That includes maybe Lamar scrambling out of the pocket, throwing on a run. It includes getting receivers into the pass catching game, not relying on tight ends as much. But if you do, you're going to get them some good looks. And we all know that the Ravens, when they were basically the Lamar show, when they were relying on Lamar to do everything. The Ravens, they were still a really good team. They had the defense. They had everything you wanted. But you go out and get Odell Beckham Jr., you go out and get Zay Flowers. You go out and get Lamar more weapons. You still have, guys that you drafted. Rashad Bateman. You still have the J.K. Dobbins. Yeah, exactly. You still have a really, really good team there in Baltimore. And I think that if this offense is anything as advertised coming out of these camps and out of these reports and everything, the Baltimore Ravens will look really scary this year. And I'm excited to see how Lamar, thrives in a new style of passing offense.
Yeah, I mean, he said that he wants to throw for 6,000 yards this year. Obviously,
I don't even know if I can do that in Madden.
Right, I think it's a very ambitious goal. But Lamar Jackson, I mean, he wins 80% of the time, 80% of the games he plays. He just has to play, right? I mean, this team is always top of the conference when he's healthy. When he's not, the team falls off respectfully. But it also shows how talented and how impactful Lamar is. They were going to be my team, right, in this. But I saw you had him, and I was like, you know what? I still believe in Jacksonville to maybe take down a Cincinnati or a Kansas City in the playoffs. But that is going to do it for today's show. I mean, today, we talked about the Eastern Conference Finals, how that wrapped up there. DeAndre Hopkins being cut. We talked about Eric Lewis. We dived into some fan questions that you guys sent in over on Instagram. Any last thoughts before we get out of here? It's Thursday. We're gonna get into the NBA Finals.
Yeah, it should be. We'll see live murder on TV come Thursday when we see Jokic go against Bam Adebayo. But we'll save that for Thursday's show. But this was fun answering questions you guys had and even going over some of the news that's happened in both sports or both leagues this past week.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, we're on the road to 300 subscribers as a channel. Help us get there. If you enjoyed the channel at all, these are usually 45-minute to an hour podcast, twice a week that we release. We also have 2 other episodes a week. If you're interested in fantasy content, we're grinding over here at the TAP headquarters, right? But, we're on the road to 300 subscribers. Help us get to that milestone so we can continue to grow and maybe hit 500 one day or maybe even 1,000, right? But drop a like, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff if you enjoyed. We'll see you guys on Thursday, right? With some NBA Finals breakdown, preview, predictions. We're going to get into some rankings for players in the Finals matchups. We're going to get into all of that on Thursday. So subscribe to the channel and turn those post notifications on so you guys can see us then. Have a good one. We're out.